Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Bismarck. It's been a little while, and it's about time. This AL event is a great excuse to take out this amazing Tier 8 battleship. I had played it a little over a year ago, and then before that, it was all the way back in 2021. It's been a while, really, since I've covered the Bismarck fully on this channel, and it's a really strong Tier 8 battleship. In fact, I typically prefer it to Tirpitz. As far as utility goes, I think Hydro is just way better than 6-kilometer torpedoes. Generally, the Hydro will keep you alive, help you out in a brawl far more often than the Torps will on the Tirpitz. I generally find that anybody who gets within 6 kilometers of a Bismarck is already pretty much finished off. And that's where the Torps would help you on the Tirpitz. Whereas if you're trying to push in, torpedoes, dealing with enemy torpedoes is always a tricky thing, and a Hydro is extremely useful for dealing with that. So if you're like me, a premium Bismarck sounds pretty good if you generally would prefer the utility of that Hydro over the torpedoes. How much is it going to cost you? Well, it's not cheap, of course. 75 bucks Canadian for the Bismarck in the premium shop, or 14,300 doubloons. That is very expensive. Consider that on Black Friday, Tier 8s go on a 30% discount. And this is already above a standard Tier 8 price thanks to the extra skin and commander if you're interested in that. I'm talking about the gameplay elements here specifically. Subjectively, you can decide if the camo in that is worth it to you. But as far as gameplay is concerned, that's a really expensive tech tree ship. I really don't think it's worth that price. I think considering the gameplay elements are the same, you could just grind out a regular Bismarck, and if you really liked it that much, you could put the premium economic pack onto it, which doesn't quite give you all the benefits like moving your commanders around, but it does help a lot with the economy. That is for doubloons though, so again, you do have to spend on that. If you are interested in getting this Bismarck, or maybe you already have it and you're just struggling a little bit, want some ideas on how to play it better, I got you covered. I actually have 2 E-games for you here. Very strong performance out of the Bismarck while playing. Yet, I had some frustrations here, as you can see with this match. First of all, it's really important in any brawling ship to isolate 1v1s. I say this all the time, but we're going to go fight an Amagi and a Caracello, and actually a King George is going to push up on us as well. There's a Bayern potentially available for a crossfire here soon too, and we're fairly alone here. But we can make it work, all right? Bismarck is very powerful as long as you put it in the correct position. So first of all, we're just not going to push out too far. I go a little too far here. I wanted to stop a little sooner. But in this case, fortunately, the Amagi isn't actually going to shoot us for some reason. But you really do need to isolate fights. I should have stopped a few meters back so the Amagi or the King George could not fire at me. And that keeps you safe. Isolating these fights using island cover is so important. Anytime you can remove targets from firing at you, getting yourself out of outnumbered positions is really important. Using island cover is hard in carrier games, and I'll talk about it soon. I'm trying not to, okay? I'm trying to hold it in, that rant, because there's important things to notice here, all right? Here we're also going to be reversing, since we know the Bayern is very close to getting our broadside, and this King George has pushed out enough that we can easily get a shot on him. We're selecting our secondary target, of course, with manual secondaries, and going to push up here since the Amagi now is going to try and push around the island for us. So really focusing on our positioning there. Fortunately for us, the Bayern is actually just shooting HE. He does get a fire, but that could have been a lot more damage, certainly. Unfortunately, not a ton of damage into the broadside King George. That's one of the downsides of using a full secondary build. And now we're on a double permanent fire. Did you see the mistake? I'm not perfect in this game, guys. I damage controlled a single fire. I thought I could greed and get away with it. But no, alas, I could not, as the carrier came by to get us a second permanent fire. So we're probably going to go down here. We've managed to take out 2 of the enemy battleships now. This Amagi really trying to get a shot on us, still can't get there, just because we're focused on our positioning. I'm not sure if it's always the case, but with newer players in this game, aim is often a priority topic for beginners. Understandably so, you want to learn the ins and outs of hitting your shots, But I think a more important element to this game is positioning. Far more important than aiming is where you position your ship. If you can set your ship up in the right positions, you're just going to succeed, even if your aim isn't perfect, all right? There's problems with this aiming system too that we don't need to get into here. Really, it is all about that positioning. We shoot one time at the Bayern and use our secondaries to finish them off, letting our main guns fire at this York. Unfortunately, we do end up going down, but we managed to take a lot of damage off the enemy team's push here with us, and we should actually end up winning this game. Now, it's probably the time you've all been waiting for looking at this match. Yes, this Nagato player is certainly having fun. I hope he got a survey after this game. That would just be cruel, wouldn't it? But we've all had it, right? Are you enjoying this game? Would you recommend this game to a friend? After a match like that, probably not, to be honest with you. We got 200,000 damage, we got 4 kills, we had a good brawl there. But there was a lot of frustration too. Unfortunately, Bismarck deals with carrier matches terribly. This ship has next to no AA. It's really short AA range, allowing carriers to outflank you without being in your AA bubble, and are easily able to line up their drops on you. This is a very poor ship into carriers, unfortunately. Maybe that's I'm no history buff, but perhaps that's some historical accuracy coming into play. Uh-oh. You see where that Torp's heading, don't ya? Damage control on cooldown. Uh-oh. Fortunately, we do manage to get around this island. But this is another problem for the Bismarck. You can do great in these brawls. I think playing it in tier 8 ranked modes when there's no carriers or subs, this ship is really fun. But in randoms, you're going to get up tiers into tier 10 some of the time. And matches like this are going to happen, where you try and play islands, you try and isolate fights like I've been doing this game, and you just run into situations where the enemy team refuses to come fight for the cap. Most of the enemy team went to this flank, and they just stayed up in the C5 area. Bismarck's no sniper, but when the guns connect, oh, they do some pretty good damage. This is the full secondary build still. Perhaps it's worth building into those main guns, don't you think? But it is really difficult for the Bismarck to deal with this. Tier 10 players do play more passive, generally, farming for average damages and all that. I can be guilty of doing that myself, all right? No shame. But this Mecklenburg certainly did not help his team. No shade, but you could play a little more aggressive, man, surely. We do manage to help finish off that Monarch. The Utrecht bombs do get him. And an example of what happens in tier 10. This is a tough ship to up tier. There are much better ships to up tier than the Bismarck. But it does do really well with a hybrid build. In fact, this is my preferred layout of the ship. I tried the full secondary build because I think a lot of people want to play it that way. Bismarck is not the best secondary ship in the game anymore. It is thoroughly outclassed by the battlecruiser line, as well as the new Pan-American battleships are just so much better. Their DPM is higher, they have better pen, they have better accuracy, and they even have better range in certain cases as well. Bismarck, though, really powerful as a hybrid. So here we're taking main gun accuracy. That's the difference. We're still taking some secondary range on our commander. We're still taking some secondary accuracy on our commander, but not the full range. And that nets us a 10.1 kilometer secondary range. I think that's more than enough to be sufficient in a brawl for the secondaries to help you out in a brawling situation. But notice how many citadels we're going to get in this match and in the next one. These guns are good, man. They really are. They aren't perfect, but they're much better than you would think if you've only run the full secondary build. They have Battleship Dispersion 1.8 Sigma, but crucially, you have a fast reload. As far as tier 8 battleships go, you have a very quick reload at 26 seconds. Not a lot of ships get better than that. Only Vanguard and Monarch with their 25 seconds, Odin with 23, and Zeton with 22.5. But those also have some issues. For larger caliber AP at this tier with 8 guns or more, this is a very fast reload. And I really do enjoy that for the Bismarck here. This build allowing us to still get a lot of secondary damage in these games. My philosophy has changed a little bit when it comes to these secondary battleships. Greeting for the full build, I find, often puts me in bad positions because I over push because they're just outside of secondary range, right? A little kilometer push up and I would get them in secondary range. Often gets me killed, to be honest with you. When I'm running this more hybrid focused build, I'm a little more careful about where I'm pushing. Again, it's about positioning our ship properly. In this case, this push worked out. But notice what was in A and undetected until now? Yes, that is an Azur. Very scary to push into one of those. Certainly, we would be in trouble if we were at Tirpitz. But with a Bismarck, we have a Hydro. Look at that. We just spot the torpedoes out. Isn't that nice? I don't think our torps would have helped us much at all in that brawl. And yet the Hydro allows me to be confident in pushing even an Azur. Notice how I started turning around as my Hydro was running out of duration, though. That's another key that we have to think about. Always shoot those destroyers. You never know what crazy accuracy you might get. We got surprisingly good luck on that Azur there. Ranger spotted, so you know what we have to do. We got to focus that guy down. We do not want to get focused by the carriers. Another Citadel. And another downside of the Bismarck, all right? I had some good games, don't get me wrong, but I was really frustrated with the turret angles, of all things. I totally forgot that Bismarck does not get Tirpitz firing angles. It just is so much worse. Forwards, 35 degrees is fine. It's nowhere near as bad as GK, so it's manageable. But backwards, 42 degrees to fire everything, and one of the other guns, you can get 3 guns firing at like a 35 degree angle. It's a little awkward, all right? It's a little awkward to play, where Tirpitz just has the very nice 35 forward, 35 backwards. I don't know why the second turret on the Bismarck has such poor firing angles backwards, but that's why we're so broadside. Small advantage to the Tirpitz there. Alongside the secondary firing angles, actually, Tirpitz has much better firing angles on the secondaries compared to Bismarck. I don't know why that is. They're fairly similar ships, not copy-paste hull, obviously, but it does mean that Bismarck is a little bit more awkward to play when it comes to the angles on this ship. But for me, I really do find that Hydro to be so consistent. That's such a nice tool to have for a ship that does need to push up. If you're sniping with the Bismarck, I think you're doing it wrong, all right? There's not a lot of ships where you can say that so definitively, but I do think with Bismarck, it's pretty clear this ship needs to be within at least 15 kilometers of the enemy. When we got to those positions, we got a lot of Citadels. We got a lot of damage out of these guns. Another E game, maybe it's because it's this AL version and it's early days for it, that the E's here are pretty low base XP, but I'll take it. Think of the thumbnail, guys. Pushing here, probably not a good idea, but again, we have a Hydro. It's so nice, but we need to recognize we don't want to push enemy spawn. Enemy Vanguard making his way to the A line, his home apparently. That's a joke. Don't take it too literally, all right? We gotta joke around a little bit. It is frustrating though if we want to take it a little more seriously. It's annoying, all right? It's annoying to play this game and have people just run away from you constantly. This is an awful push, awful, horrible push. The reason is the enemy Duke of York, the Mackinson, the Veneto, even the cruisers could easily turn their guns and start firing at us, and we're just in a crossfire. All right, this is important to recognize too. It might look open waters here, clear days. The enemy destroyer on the 10 line, we don't got to worry about that. The other DD's over on the 2 line. We don't got to worry about torps here. But the real problem is pushing into a crossfire here. So we do start turning away rather quickly. This is just to maybe relieve some pressure on the opposite side of the map. You see the Veneto, Mackinson coming back, and we need to get out of here before we're fully committed in. Again, running that hybrid build here, this is the one I would personally recommend you try out first, just because it's frustrating, all right? We're even getting some salvos here with this accuracy build that are not landing, shall we say. It's frustrating to play a ship, wait for such a long reload, at least compared to cruisers and destroyers, and get nothing out of it, all right? I do feel like main gun accuracy is very important these days. It's just going to affect your entire match, where secondary range, it'll only impact you a very small portion of the time. It's not just in brawls. You can't even think of it as just impacting your brawls. You got to think of it as impacting the very beginning of an open water brawl. that's the only time it really helps you. If you're using islands to push up, more often than not, people are popping out within that 10.1 kilometer range. It's really between 10.1 and 11.5, I think, is the real benefit to that upgrade. Whereas running accuracy mod, not secondary mod, the accuracy upgrade can more consistently get you salvos like that. And who doesn't love those black ribbons? Am I right? If you're playing battleships, I mean, that is just what we want to see every single time. At least for me, that is so enjoyable. Another small note here is I'm not targeting my secondaries on this Veneto. Secondaries target the waterline, all right? And at such close range here, we would only be landing our secondaries into the Veneto's belt armor. They may light fires or whatever, but if we want actual damage out of the secondaries, it's got to hit the superstructure when he's broadside like that. And in that case, we actually want worse accuracy, so some of them disperse up into his superstructure. Very niche thing, but if you're in a brawl, something to consider. Now that the Duke of York is the target, though, that guy we full pen everywhere. That's the special sauce of Bismarck over something like a Massachusetts, for example. It has 26 mil pen on the small secondaries and 38 on the large secondaries. Running IFHE, you pen 32 millimeters everywhere. So if you run into more lightly armored battleships at your tier and below, you're going to notice these secondaries full pen a lot, especially at those closer ranges where you land so many more salvos. Overpen, 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 and the Citadel to finish him off. It's nice to have the accuracy, man. We landed 4 out of our 8 shells there at such a long range on that cruiser. Sometimes you really do need that number of hits to finish people off. It's not always going to, even on low health targets, get you the full pen that you need or the Citadel that you need to finish off an enemy ship here. Honestly, the Bismarck was surprisingly good. I got to set aside my frustrations towards double carrier, double sub games. Dealing with that is always going to be bad, no matter the ship that you're playing. So I shouldn't hold that against the Bismarck. It is annoying, though, something to consider. But if we can set that aside, take a look at this ship against its own tier specifically, it's still a very powerful ship. I think Bismarck is great. Looking at some of these stats here, I notice on EU in particular, it is far and away the most played tier 8 battleship. It's like not even close in the last patch. So still a very popular ship. Don't think it's bad just because it's old, and sometimes the YouTube guy complains a little too much when he doesn't get the perfect salvo every single time. I'm guilty, caught, all right, caught. Bismarck's still awesome, and we can have some very fun games, even in random battles. Obviously, it's going to shine so much brighter in ranked modes, in special brawl modes, because you get close range fights. And what can we do in close range fights? Well, we can nearly dev strike a Duke of York when he's angled. That's crazy. That is crazy. I did not expect that out of the Bismarck. I was just hoping for some overmatch damage there. We got the Citadels instead. Very strong showing from the Bismarck. I will say, though, I really noticed the poor firing angles backwards with the Bismarck. One of the things you're going to notice when playing this ship and Tirpitz back-to-back, oftentimes Tirpitz, you're kind of YOLOing a little harder for those torpedoes, where Bismarck, you're more often turning out and kiting away from the Brawl a little bit, trying to manage your position. That's kind of the key here, right? And because of that, you're spending more time in that close range, but turned away, kited position. And that's where that second turret firing angle really starts to hurt you. I noticed it pretty badly while playing it. It's manageable, certainly it is manageable, but a little bit annoying. It's not just that Bismarck is a more comfortable version of a Tirpitz, where you get the more comfortable consumable in exchange for the torpedoes. There are some downsides there with those firing angles. But if you're wondering about the build, how to build this ship, one way you can do it is this. Just full send those secondaries. Try and keep them alive as much as you can because they do get permanently destroyed. IFHE here letting these smaller caliber secondaries pen over 32 millimeters. And then, of course, going range and accuracy. And I even went close quarters combat for an extra 10% DPM. If I'm trying my best with a full secondary build, I really should be getting within secondary range almost every game, so 10% reload sounds pretty good. It's harder to play, though. You do lack the concealment, and that is a bit of a problem, as well as lacking healing here. But you have standard heals, standard cooldown. It's not like a Massachusetts where your heals come back every 40 seconds and it's really comfy that way. Nope, you get 80-second cooldown. And with Bismarck armor being the way it is, which is good, outside of your superstructure, which at closer ranges takes an absolute beating. This ship can be burst down through its superstructure. Even if you angle it well, I mean, look at this. This hull armor is absolutely incredible. You're angling well, you just get smashed through your superstructure. Everybody knows it these days already, and it's very common to take even over 10,000 damage from battleship salvos, even into your angled superstructure. It's a little annoying, and healing through that can be rather tricky. Now, for the more hybrid build, this is something I would go with. This is purely out of that first game that I showed you. Yeah, it's very frustrating. I'm doing my best to not rant about it every single video, but it happens every time I play the game, man. So maybe I do need to rant about it every video. It is my experience with the game, bro. It's so annoying. At least this skill does get you back to your damage control and your heal 40% faster in those times where the carrier is just permanently glued to you. It does mean you don't take IFHE though, and you still get 26 mil pen. That's more than enough for tier 7 and below battleships, but not the tier 8 and above. So the game that you saw with me playing this ship in the hybrid version, I was running IFHE, and the only reason I swapped is purely out of that first game that I showed you, which was, I think, the last game I ended up playing. So maybe that's impacting my decision-making here too much. AR is just too good. And then we're taking concealment here instead of extra healing. Generally, that 5th heal's pretty hard to get to if you're brawling it out or picking your perfect opportunity to push. You shouldn't be... The perfect opportunity to push is not one in which you need 5 heals, all right? You don't need 5 heals for the perfect push, okay? Where concealment helps us a lot. 12.9 detect is really, really good, especially into up tiers, allows you to maneuver around the map, be a bit more of a flanker, play a bit more of a battle cruiser role in those double up tiers, and you'll find some success, especially if you're taking accuracy build. Of course, the carrier can come spot you for free anytime you want to, completely negating your concealment. Unlucky. Okay, I'll stop. Aiming systems, though, here instead. Very, very important to take that. And I think that's about it for the Bismarck. Very good ship still. Surprisingly so. I thought it would have been more power crept than this. Perhaps I got fortunate to face my own tier more often than not and managed to find maps where I was actually able to push up with islands. So many maps these days are... well, let's just say sniping fests where there's no good islands to limit firing angles and push up with. So Bismarck's going to struggle in those, of course, as well. You really do need the right matchmaker queue to get a really good time out of a Bismarck. It's not only a Bismarck problem, it's really all of these close range focus ships. They really do just perform so much better in ranked or brawl modes, or some of the special modes that they bring in, maybe like an airship escort thing comes back, I don't know. Anything like that. So a good ship to pick up, certainly one I would recommend grinding for. And as you get to the tier 10, even Preussen gets pretty potent main guns. Pretty much Republic reload, same overmatch values, but an even tankier hull. It's a pretty good ship to play as a mid-range gun platform, even if it's not the best at brawling these days at tier 10. So definitely recommend the line if you're interested in this ship at all. And 14,300 doubloons is just very expensive for a Bismarck. Something you can get completely for free just by playing up to the tier 8. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. This was a nice excuse to play the Bismarck again. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching and have a great rest of your day.